D-Mace, Fingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville Studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, David Janes here with you. Derek Mason on the sideline again today. Still feeling under the weather, but we gave Derek an extra day to recuperate because we're going to be on the road starting tomorrow. And we will tell you more about where we will be as the SEC tournament gets underway. David and I are back at the Game Nashville studios. Willie Donick in Northern California with the Nashville Predators, who open a road trip tonight against the San Jose Sharks, a late puck drop of 9:30 p.m. Central, pregame at 8:30, of course, right here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Hello, Willie. How are you?
Hello, Adam. Good to talk to you guys.
How's California treating you?
So far, so good. Beautiful weather here. It's in the 50s in San Jose. Sunny. You know the scene. Very scenic. So we'll see. We'll see what the team brings to the table on this California road trip. Starts tonight against the Sharks, who have gutted their roster. They've got a lot of young players in there, and we will not see the Yaroslav, as he now goes by, Askarov rematch tonight because he is injured and he has not played well of late. He's been in the minors, and so that would have been some good theater as it was the last time. But you will not see round two of that just yet.
So, Willie, yesterday, as you were preparing to depart for San Jose, the news broke that the Titans signed offensive tackle Dan Moore Jr. to a 4-year, $82 million contract, $50 million in guarantees. And I would say that the instant reaction to that move was unenthusiastic. My favorite reaction came from Andrew Filipponi, who is a sports talk radio host for 93.7 The Fan in Pittsburgh. This was his tweet, quote, $50 million for Dan Moore Jr. is the worst use of $50 million in the history of American currency since Alexander Hamilton invented the U.S. Treasury. So that was the spiciest take on the Dan Moore signing. And oftentimes, as we know, Willie, in free agency, regardless of sport, the hot takes are flying as soon as the contract figures come out. But it seems over the course of the day, cooler heads prevailed. And I thought Jared on his show said it well, that the Titans had a huge need on the offensive line. We know that. We've known this. And sometimes you're going to overpay to make a problem go away. So you sign Dan Moore to be your left tackle. You shift J.C. Latham to right tackle. Hopefully, you're set at tackle for the foreseeable future. There are other elements of the offensive line we will discuss. But since you left before we really dove into the Dan Moore of it all, what is your take on the Titans signing of Dan Moore to a 4-year, $82 million contract?
Well, Jared, I think, makes the right point. And I think we made this last year in free agency. It's buyer beware. Players get overpaid in free agency. And I think this was the case here. Now, do you feel like with Bill Callahan coaching him and maybe a different offensive system, maybe with a little more wisdom, he is still pretty young. You know, he's not 32 or 31. He's still pretty young. Can he be better than he was in Pittsburgh? And it was pointed out by a lot of people. I think it was one of the first things I heard said when Jake was on with you is when you play in that division, you're playing some pretty fierce edge rushers and including the best one twice a year in Myles Garrett. So let's give him a chance. He is overpaid. Let's just get that out there right off the start. I don't want to hear this during the season. They paid $50 million for this guy. Well, yeah, that's the only choice you have if you want to get a decent starter who is still in the prime of his career. He is overpaid. He will be overpaid. So let's get that on the table right now.
By the way, according to overthecap.com, Dan Moore's $21 million average per year is 6th among left tackles in the NFL. So, again, you're right, Willie, that in free agency, players get overpaid. That is the nature of free agency. What works well in terms of Dan Moore's ability is his durability. According to Nick Suss of the Tennessean, dating to his days at Texas A&M, Moore has started 106 out of 108 possible games. So the one thing that you can count on with Dan Moore is that he will play. And that is a big part of this, considering the issues that the Titans have had bringing in injured players. Dan Moore, for all his faults, he does play. And that's a big part of it if you are going to invest significant dollars in a player.
Right. And once again, there are flaws with who's available. There aren't 12 left tackles in the grocery store when you go and fix the problem that you had. So if you're wailing about this pick, then what would you have them do? Use the first round pick on a tackle? I don't think that's going to happen. Trade? You can't trade draft picks. They have nothing to trade, really. So this was the best alternative I think that they had to try to get a sizable upgrade. The other alternative was to run Nicholas Petit-Frere back out there and have it 2.0 or 3.0 with him and hope that the light goes on. So this is the cost of doing business. They don't have a ton of extra cash floating around like they did last year. So if you notice, they haven't been super busy. There were a lot of big signings there. That was really their only sizable one, wouldn't you say?
Yes, for sure. Here is
so if they had signed a 34-year-old guy or a 30-year-old guy who had been hurt, let's take somebody with like a Ryan Kelly profile. You'd have the same people bringing up a lot of just different set of problems, right? Oh, he can't stay healthy. Why do they want this guy? He hasn't been healthy in 4 years. He's past his prime. All of these flaws come out. These aren't perfect players that end up. Otherwise, they would be with their original team.
So here is a quick synopsis of Dan Moore's career according to ESPN. Because before yesterday, to borrow a phrase from Floyd Reese, I did not know Dan Moore from a jar of Vicks. So I had to do plenty of research yesterday. And here is a quick synopsis of Dan Moore's career according to ESPN. He was a 4-year starter at left tackle after the Steelers selected him in the 4th round of the 2021 draft. He fought off competition for the starting job in 2023 when the Steelers drafted tackle Broderick Jones in the 1st round. Moore continued to solidify his job in 2024, despite the Steelers drafting tackle Troy Fontenot, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, in the 1st round, and team brass saying it envisioned Jones playing left tackle before the season. Jones, though, remained at right tackle throughout the season after Fontenot suffered a season-ending knee injury in September. The 26-year-old Moore had a rough end to his 2024 season and finished with a league-high 12 sacks allowed. He also recorded 21 penalties over 4 seasons, including 11 holding calls. And here is the fickle nature of quick reaction to free agency, Willie. Seth Walder at ESPN had a running blog grading all of the major free agent moves. A lot of websites did this. Seth Walder gave the Titans an A, not an A minus, an A on signing Dan Moore. The Athletic, doing the same exercise, gave the Titans a D for signing Dan Moore. So, instant reaction. One person says A, another person says D. This is the humorous aspect of having to react to these things on the fly. We have 2 varying opinions on this signing, according to the Athletic and ESPN.
That's fascinating. I haven't read Walder's take. I did read the grade in the Athletic, but it really doesn't have a lot of detail in the Athletics grade. They go down through all the a ton of signings there. but he says, in part in The Athletic, he was a 4th-round pick he's got the body of a first-round left tackle, 6'5", 315. But a lot has been made on the most sacks, most pressures in the NFL since 2021. So, and it says, the Titans obviously allowed a lot of sacks. But I think a lot of things go into that, right? Who's the quarterback? How long does he hold the ball? We came to learn that last year, right? That Will Levis, and even before him, Ryan Tannehill, they held the ball more than most quarterbacks. Levis might hold the ball more than any quarterback. And that does translate into how many times the tackle and the guard and everybody else on the score sheet gets credited with a sack against or a pressure against. So the systems can help that some. I don't know if that's the issue with Moore. I'd be lying if I told you I have a great scouting report on Dan Moore. But I don't know if I would give it a D, and I don't know if I would give it an A. I'd give it a wait and see, and tell me the alternative would be how I would grade it.
So Seth Walder, who gave the Titans an A for this signing on ESPN, he wrote, quote, "We don't know who will play quarterback for the Titans in 2025, but that person will have better pass protection with Moore now on the team. Moore is coming off a nice season in which he put up career highs in both pass block win rate, 93%, 11th best out of 66 qualifiers, and run block win rate, 76%, 23rd best. Offensive line can be a place where players take longer to develop, so I'm inclined to invest in Moore's improvement." He continues, "Last season, Titans tackles J.C. Latham, 88%, and Nicholas Petit-Frere, 82%, ranked 40th and 64th in pass block win rate among tackles. If Latham, their first-round pick in 2024, develops, the Titans could have a really nice pair of tackles, which is crucial for setting a quarterback up for success."
Well, you guys hit this yesterday right after the signing, because my first thought was, and they hinted at it at the combine, that they might, if they found a better left tackle. So they had been sort of plotting this, I think, looking at who was available. And I am looking forward to hearing the explanation by Borgonzi and by Callahan as to why they thought this was best move. But I suspect that just because Dan Moore's always been a left tackle, that's why they're moving Latham to right tackle. But I'm a little disappointed. I really thought that Latham, if you stick with him, he's so young, that could be the best guy that you want left tackle long term. But I don't know what they're seeing there. Maybe they just think he'll be a great right tackle, which isn't the worst thing in the world if he's really, really good for a second contract and beyond. But to me, that might be the bigger story than who they're putting in there at left tackle. But ideally, right, your line now is pretty set at 4 of the 5 spots, and you can always probably find a guard somewhere in there.
Right. It could be Dylan Radins coming back and playing right guard. So they do have an opening at right guard, but theoretically they have their left tackle in Dan Moore, their left guard in Peter Skoronski, their center with Lloyd Cushenberry, right guard TBD, and J.C. Latham at right tackle. And we will discuss all of that coming up. But you're right. You touched on one thing, Willie, about the sack numbers that Dan Moore allowed. And each statistical service has a different way of measuring sacks. So like if you go by Pro Football Focus, that's different than if you went by Next Gen Stats, which is different if you went by True Media, which I believe ESPN uses. They all have different ways of evaluating sacks allowed. So I've seen varying numbers in terms of how many sacks allowed Dan Moore totaled last season. Bill Barnwell points out that J.C. Latham allowed 14 sacks last season, according to Next Gen Stats, the second most of any player in the league. The guy who allowed more sacks than Latham is the guy taking over the job at left tackle in Tennessee. Moore allowed a league-high 16.5 sacks, although, to your point, Willie, he probably wasn't as bad as that sounds. Some of those sacks were a product of playing in front of Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, who have a habit of extending plays. Moore allowed only 14 quick quarterback pressures, which was a much more reasonable total, ranking 53rd among all linemen. Latham allowed 26, which was tied for second most behind Seahawks tackle Charles Cross.
Okay, let's just give you one more take. And this was, I don't have the latest one, but this is last year's preseason scouting report from the FTN Football Almanac, which is another set. We're comparing numbers, right? And I think this is good for our audience. Look, these people have done the math. This is not your math, Adam, or my math, but it's easy to hear these. He's given up the most sacks, right? And then you throw it in there, and it sounds like he's terrible, right? But there's different ways of calculating numbers. When it's 11 on 11, it's not always clear cut everything that happens on the field. But every year it seems like there are advancements there. But here's the scouting report on Dan Moore from that for the Pittsburgh Steelers going into last year after 3 years being a starter. Dan Moore Jr. might be the odd man out among Pittsburgh's young linemen, which obviously did not end up being the case. He started all the games. Moore told reporters during this year's OTAs he does not feel comfortable playing on the right side of the line. That might be a clue as to why they're moving Latham to the right and keeping Moore on the left. Moore's performance at left tackle is what forced this conversation in the first place. His 8.2 pressure rate, 4.8%, 8.2% pressure rate, 4.8% blown block rate on runs were 6th and 10th highest among tackles in 2023 with a minimum of 500 snaps. It was the second time in 3 years he led all Steelers linemen in both categories. So it just sounds like he's been a flawed starter, albeit at a very, very difficult position for a few years now, which is why the Steelers let him walk, and the Steelers must have something better in mind.
One piece of Titans adjacent news, former Chargers and Titans cornerback Kristian Fulton has agreed to terms with the Kansas City Chiefs on a 2-year, $20 million contract, including $15 million fully guaranteed, according to Adam Schefter. So good job, Kristian Fulton, securing that bag. Kristian Fulton headed from Los Angeles to Kansas City.
There's always a job for somebody who's halfway decent at covering, and right? I mean, you just keep playing. If you can cover somebody, at least if there's a chance you can cover somebody, they'll sign you. So I always think this is going on around the league too. What would be the Titans' reaction to that? A Titans fan who watched Kristian Fulton play here can't wait to get rid of this guy. Let him move on. Who wants Kristian Fulton? Well, the Chiefs want Kristian Fulton, right? So they don't think he's that bad.
And he was productive with the Chargers last year as well.
He did well, yeah, and we could have had that conversation last year. But I guess the point is, this happens around the league with all the teams. I'm sure the Steelers fans are laughing, saying, "Ha, the Titans signed Dan Moore." Can you believe how much money the Titans paid Dan Moore?
You may have missed this yesterday, but we did have one Steelers fan text in and say that Dan Moore is going to make Andre Dillard look like Bruce Matthews.
Right. And I'm sure, look, this is how you always have your team under the microscope.
Correct.
You're watching your team's offensive line every week, every play. You're not watching the other team's offensive line struggle and go through issues, right? Everybody's got a patch of players like this. And so Dan Moore is in this category. But that's why in the middle of the season last year, I think we all were laughing that we're saying, hey, what? Maybe it's the Titans. When we were going down the list of players that were doing decent things for different teams, right? They were still in the league being productive. It's not always just the flaw of the team that lets them go. It's just the state of the league. Sometimes you change addresses, you get into a different system. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. The Titans really have to hope that Dan Moore matures, gets to another level, and Bill Callahan can get the best out of him.
That's a good segue to our next segment, because there is pressure on one person in particular with the signing of Dan Moore by the Titans yesterday. 615-737-1025. Any thoughts now that you are a day removed from the Titans paying Dan Moore 4 years, $82 million, $50 million guaranteed? Now that you've had some time to digest it, how do you feel? Do you feel differently? than you did yesterday. Let us know on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. And make sure that you join us, 1025, 1063 The Game, for an SEC watch party for the rest of the week as we broadcast live from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. at Mellow Mushroom on Broadway tomorrow, Assembly Food Hall on Thursday, and the Pub in the Gulch on Friday. On-site coverage of the SEC tournament brought to you by Toyota, Guinness, the New Cumberland.com, Volunteer Hose and Gasket, and Sloan's Motorcycle ATV. For more details, visit thegamenashville.com/events.
All right, let's talk F&M Bank. Banking made easy on purpose. These guys do a great job right in the middle of your community, making you feel comfortable and secure about your finances. And they try to get right in the middle of your community. The chances are there's a location right near you. So tell them I sent you. Come on by, learn more about how to make banking easier on purpose. F&M Bank. Just go to myfmbank.com and find the locations that we're talking about. They stretch all the way through Middle Tennessee. There's 6 in Clarksville alone. There's one up in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and places like Springfield, Murfreesboro, right in the heart of Nashville on West End Avenue. They're all over the place. So you just find out the nearest one to you. Get in touch with F&M's friendly team today and discover how they can empower your financial goals. F&M Bank. We take it to the bank every Friday on our show at 1:45, and it's March Madness. This is when I like to thrive in our contest. It's going to be fun. F&M Bank. Just go to myfmbank.com. Member FDIC.
Tune in tomorrow on 102.5, 106.3 The Game for Vanderbilt men's basketball as the number 12 seeded Commodores take on the 13th seeded Texas Longhorns to start the SEC men's basketball tournament. Tip-off is at 2:30 p.m. and the pregame will begin at 2. Coverage is also available on 102.5 on the 102.5 The Game app and at thegamenashville.com. Quickly, Willie, how are you feeling about Vanderbilt in Texas tomorrow?
Tough game. Texas has excellent talent. They've got a lottery pick in Trey Johnson who can take over the game. I think Vanderbilt has a coaching edge, but Vanderbilt's lost a couple here, so I think it's important for Vanderbilt to try to get a little momentum back here. But they'll have their hands full. I haven't looked at the line. I would imagine it's probably a pick'em kind of game. I think Texas has overall talent edge. I think Vanderbilt has the coaching edge.
By the way, Vanderbilt defeated Texas at Memorial Gym earlier this season, 86-78. So
it was tight, and that went back and forth. The final score probably doesn't tell you that tight what kind of game it was. It was a swing game. Vanderbilt jumped ahead. Texas made a big run, went back ahead, and then they were exchanging blows in the second half. And I think Vanderbilt benefited from being on their home court there.
So the SEC tournament kicks off tomorrow, starts at noon. South Carolina and Arkansas at Bridgestone Arena. As I said before the break, we will be on location Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Come join us for an SEC tournament watch party. So we were talking about Dan Moore, the Titan signing of the offensive tackle to a 4-year contract. And Willie, right before we went to break, you mentioned a name that I was going to bring up in this segment. Somebody who I feel there's a lot of pressure on him now, and that's Bill Callahan, or as Jared says, Bill Callahan. There's a lot of pressure on Bill Callahan. And Paul Kaharski at paulkaharski.com had a story. The headline, with Titans O-line investments, I have immediate expectations. He writes, quote, Bill Callahan gets a pass for the year one failures. He probably overestimated some of what he had to work with, thinking he could make more of Nicholas Petit-Frere and Jalen Duncan than he ultimately could. Ran Carthon should have known better what those players were and given the elder Callahan more. Now, Bill Callahan has had a hand in choosing the 2 starting tackles and the starting center, and he will also chime in on the right guard. So here is the projected Titans starting offensive line as we enter the season. Dan Moore at left tackle, making $21 million per season. That is 6th among left tackles, according to overthecap.com. You have Peter Skoronski at left guard. As we know, he was the 11th overall pick in the NFL draft. Lloyd Cushenberry at center, making $12.5 million per season. That is 4th among centers, according to overthecap.com. The right guard position is still a question mark, although we can maybe project Dylan Radins filling that role. And then J.C. Latham at right tackle, of course, the 7th overall pick in the NFL draft. So that is there has been a lot of investment made by the Tennessee Titans, both in money and in draft capital, on that offensive line. It is now up to Bill Callahan to work that magic that we thought he would last season, was unable to do it. I think the pressure's on Bill Callahan to make the most of this improved on paper offensive line.
I do think you've seen the investment over the last 2 years, and I would hope, just forget about who the offensive line coach is. I just think that with that investment, you should have higher expectations. And now, with Latham in his second year, I don't think he's even close to his ceiling, but he should be better in year 2 than year 1. Skoronski was clearly better in year 2 than he was in year 1 with some of the issues he had there. And there's strength in numbers. So if there's just a better tackle on the one side, that should help everybody down the line on the chain. So is it unreasonable to think that they could have an average to maybe a little better than average offensive line? That's got to be the hope, right? I wouldn't put it all on Bill Callahan, but certainly Callahan you would have to say has much more to work with on paper here.
The way that I've described Bill Callahan in the past, and this is where I adjust my big, thick glasses and talk even more like a nerd than I usually do. I'm a big fan of role playing video games like Final Fantasy, for example. And in those games, as you progress through the game, you can get power ups, right? Like you can add a certain type of armor or a certain type of weapon. And those accessories give you extra points on your total. Like if you've got an attack rating of 10, I'm just throwing out a number there, but you use this sword, now you have an attack rating of 13. And that's what I felt like Bill Callahan was, or I thought he was going to be last season. He was going to be that power up that, yeah, Nicholas Petit Frere may be a 60 as an offensive tackle, but by working with Bill Callahan, he'll be a 65. Obviously, you can only do so much coaching, and that did not work last season for the Titans. But the Titans have set up Bill Callahan and themselves with, again, on paper, what should be a much better offensive line.
Right. The whole Bill Callahan thing, this is now his second year. It's a unique situation because his son is the head coach. But let's not all act like everybody that made this or built this guy up to be the miracle worker made it on their own assessment, right? This isn't my evaluation of Bill Callahan. I'm not an offensive line guru that can watch an offensive line and say whether the coach is doing well or not. I think there's way too many people in the media and even some fans that think that if an offensive line is struggling, the offensive line coach must be the problem, or vice versa. If the offensive line's playing well, they must have a great offensive line coach. Sometimes it's not. It's got to be the players themselves. It's the talent. But you would have to say that people who know football, they, to a person, almost always say that Bill Callahan is a step above, a cut above everybody else. So feeling pressure, I mean, he's just a coach. He's the coach. He'll do the best he can with what he's got to work with. He's got a really good track record. So if they flunk, I'm not putting that on Bill Callahan. I don't think Bill Callahan's putting pressure on himself. Are we just going to decide he's a bad offensive line coach if they struggle this year?
I wouldn't say so, but to your point, considering it's reminiscent in a way. It's not a perfect comparison, but it's reminiscent in a way of what we've talked about with Brian Callahan, right? When the Titans hired Brian Callahan, they made sure to put in the news release all of the quarterbacks he worked with in some capacity. And that, as I've said on multiple occasions, that maybe raised the bar a little bit too high for Brian Callahan. And he was supposed to be a quarterback developer. What the hell happened to Will Levis? And on a smaller scale, considering how highly respected Bill Callahan is, I think maybe there was an outsized expectation of how much he could influence the play on the offensive line.
Well, yeah, but the players he had to work with were so limited.
I agree.
Especially at the right tackle. That was the Achilles heel that affected everybody else. But I think you could say that individually, I think he took Peter Skoronski to a next level. And I think that he got a good first year out of J.C. Latham, a rookie playing on the left side. So I wouldn't grade him poor in the first year at all. It was a function of a lot of things. And I think what we discovered also during the season was how a quarterback holding the ball can make an offensive line look bad. It was a combination of two things that made it look as bad as it did on some Sundays, where A, you had a huge problem at right tackle, and B, you had a quarterback that was holding on the ball and did not have good pocket presence at all. That you put those two things together, I don't care who the coaches are, right? That's a problem. And that's what I'm looking forward to in this coming year with a different quarterback, presumably, and now these tweaks on the offensive line. Can it look better?
615-737-1025. Your continued thoughts on the state of the Titans offensive line. Bill Callahan, Dan Moore, you tell us. 615-737-1025. Before Willie has to depart the show because he has to leave at noon to do his Predators broadcasting duties, I do want to get into the Predators for a segment in the aftermath of the NHL trade deadline, because there was something that Barry Trotz said on Friday that might have gotten lost in the shuffle, but I do think it's important to touch on, and we'll do that next. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, 1025, 1063, the game.
All right, let's talk Loan Pronto. They can get you money quickly if you've got needs. You got bills to pay, credit card bill, car loan, personal loan. Loan Pronto has several easy options to get you cash out of your home's equity with no paperwork, no cumbersome process, no junk fees, often no appraisal. You can get approved in as little as 1 day with no hard credit pull. All you have to do is call Loan Pronto, 615-499-5780. Ask about this program that they have. They'll get you that cold, hard cash quickly to address your needs. LoanPronto.com is the website. Here's the phone number again, 615-499-5780, LoanPronto.com. Get that money you need. They'll get it to you quick. You can access that cash and address those bills that are piling up on you. It's LoanPronto.com. Equal housing lender, NMLS 166-1781, subject to lender approval, NMLSconsumeraccess.org.
Gruner did a lot of adjusting this year, which I give him a lot of credit, and I handed him a tough hand at times. In terms of players up and down, number of players, all those things. I give him a tough hand, but he's growing as a coach all the time. I think he's a hell of a coach. I think he's a hell of a person. He's done everything, in, like I said, in the hockey business, and I guarantee you, take the summer, he'll come back, and he's more prepared for everything.
That was Barry Trotz in his news conference on Friday following the NHL trade deadline. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan here with you. The Predators are back in action tonight. That's where Willie is. Willie is in San Jose, California. Predators at Sharks tonight, 9:30 puck drop. So if you prefer an energy drink or coffee, however you get your caffeine, I suggest
it's March Madness. It's March Madness. You're running on adrenaline. I don't know if you need a lot of extra. If you need a little extra caffeine shot, okay, that's okay. But it's March Madness. You're gonna go on adrenaline. The great Dale Brown, coach for LSU for a long time, used to say, "I don't need to sleep. I don't need to sleep during the March." Like he was, just willing his team. He was just a motivator who had absolutely zero X's and O's on the court. I don't think he watched tape of the other team. He clearly didn't, but he could get people going with that.
As
so
the son of
channel your inner Dale Brown.
As the son of a 3.5-year-old, I will need an extra shot of something. It may not be caffeine. Either way.
Okay.
So that was Barry Trotz after the trade deadline on Friday. He said that about Andrew Brunette. I saw Robbie Stanley tweet out the quote. He transcribed it. He tweeted it out. It generated a lot of reaction because we don't have to go through the whole thing. We know this Predator season has been a disappointment, to say the least. And I think there are a lot of people who wonder what the outcome of the season could mean for Andrew Brunette. So to hear Barry Trotz, in that clip at least, be supportive of Andrew Brunette caught people's attention. But Willie, you had Barry Trotz in the broadcast booth with Chris Mason for the game on Saturday against Chicago. And you asked him about Andrew Brunette, and he had an answer that you found to be interesting that was a little bit different than the answer we just played there. Did we lose Willie?
Okay.
There he is.
Well, no, I thought you were going to play the clip.
Oh, sorry.
But, I thought it was just a unique setting. Barry Trotz joined us for the entire second period. I don't know how many general managers have ever done that. I've seen it happen in football broadcasts for preseason games. I've seen general managers go in after the trade deadline in baseball booths where it's a little more laid back. A baseball game's, by definition, a little bit more laid back than a hockey game. But I found it to be very insightful. And if you really listen closely, you got a lot of insight on a lot of different people, individual players, different moves that he made. A lot of it was the same that he had already echoed in the press conference, in the interview with Jared, where he was on before anybody else. But he went into a little more detail of what the process has been like with Andrew Brunette, which I found to be very interesting.
So we don't have the clip at the ready, so you will have to describe for us what he said.
Oh, well, okay. What he basically said was, I think there was some early on conversation when they struggled out of the gate. As we know, this is where it hit a crisis point early at 0-5 with a lot of new players. I think that it seems to be, based on what Barry Trotz told us, there was a lot of discussion of Andrew Brunette saying, this is my system. This is the way I think we should play. And a former coach who's now his boss saying, look, I've been there. I think as a coach, you're going to have to adapt the system to the players to the hand that you're dealt. And I think that's really what's going on. Barry Trotz went to great lengths to say some of the things that they have adjusted, they have adapted, and that he has dealt him a very tough hand with the injuries, the trades, etc. It hasn't worked, as everybody knows. They've sunk to the bottom. But I think moving ahead, that really becomes the question, because Barry Trotz chose Andrew Brunette as his handpicked guy. He had in John Hines a guy that, by what Barry Trotz said, was doing a very good job, but he just thought that Andrew Brunette was a unique talent, a young head coach on the rise, and that's who he wanted. And he went way back with him. But I think since that time, I think we've known from the start, if you looked at the way Barry Trotz's teams played and the way Andrew Brunette's teams played, they're different, right? So the question was, how can they get on the same page and find the right formula together? But I think what's happened a lot is Andrew Brunette has a vision of how hockey should be played. It's innovative. It's a little outside the box. He studies other things, and so he's into that. But at the same time, it may not fit the personnel that he's got. So that's where they are right now.
As I've said many times before, I don't doubt that Andrew Brunette is a good hockey coach. We have evidence that he is a good hockey coach. I'm not sure he's the right coach for this roster as it's currently constituted. I'm curious, though, what the reaction would be if the Predators, they finish the season, they're going to miss the playoffs. I was thinking about this the other day, Willie, and I'm not sure if there's a way to actually figure this out. But depending on when the Predators are eliminated officially from postseason contention, I wonder, which will be earlier than normal, I'm wondering when the last time they were out of it with however many games left in the season. I've tried to figure that out. It's not easy to figure out. I'm saying, like, if they get eliminated with 9 games left in the season, when was the last time it was that, that sort of thing?
Mathematically, you mean?
Yes, mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, officially eliminated from postseason contention.
Yeah, it's been a while. I think Barry Trotz's last season as the coach, which was 2013-14, I think I don't know if it was 9 or 10 games out, but it was, they ended up having a decent amount of points. I think they had 87 or 88 points that year, but I think there's a difference between out of it, where you kind of know you're not going to get there, and then officially being mathematically out of it. You see what I'm saying? Like, it could mean two different things.
Yes, I digress, right? But my point is, I'm curious what the reaction would be locally if the Predators season ends and Barry Trotz either says or just doesn't say, and Andrew Brunette is coming back next season after the season they had. I think there is an expectation from a lot of Predators fans that someone needs to pay the price for how poorly this season went. So Andrew Brunette, being the coach of this team, is the easiest scapegoat by far. And I'm just incredibly curious, again, to know what the reaction would be if the Predators decided to bring back Andrew Brunette after how badly this season went. And we'll see what happens.
Okay, well, let me ask you this,
Sure,
Adam. Would it make a difference how they played from now until the end of the season? Because
now I would say yes, but I would say yes, but I thought that would work for John Hines because the Predators played well under John Hines after all of the trades they made a couple of years ago, after Roman Josi and Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson and Philip Forsberg were all injured. Barry Trotz said he was basically fielding a minor league team the last quarter of the season. The Predators made it to, I think, game 80 or 81 before they were eliminated from postseason contention. I thought that would have been enough to convince Barry Trotz to keep John Hines. It didn't, and that was not the case. So normally I would say yes to your question, but based on recent history, I'm not so sure.
I think it's a different situation now, because the big thing is that Barry Trotz handpicked Andrew Brunette.
Yes.
This is his guy.
Yes.
And so I don't think he's just going to have as easy a time of casting him aside and moving on from him as it was when it wasn't his guy. And I think that's just human, right? But there are a lot of things that that have to be sort of vetted out, and that is, you know, can you get a vibe from the players? Is Andrew Burnett the coach that these players want to play for? Not that you let the players decide who coaches the team, right? That's not really how it works, but it is important to kind of see how the players react, fit. Do they like the environment? Is it is there an addition to a staff that could be the right ingredient? There's a lot to consider, I think. I would say this too. When I just look at the numbers and I look at how the team play, I think the team has played hard. Well, I don't, other than maybe a lull in there when they kind of hit the realization they weren't going to make it. I think they were human and said, "Oh man, we're just not going to be able to climb this hill," and that's it. But for the most part, I think they've played hard. I think the offense generates enough chances. You and I have looked at those numbers all year long. The zone time, the things that they're trying to do, I think that's there. The defensive coverage, that needs work. And I'm not sure if that's the head coach or a tweak to who's in charge, like the defensive coordinator, if you will. That's not really a title in hockey, but I think the attention to detail on defense must get a lot better. And I think that's something that Barry Trotz, as a guy that was one of the best, I think, at attention to detail on defense, has to be seeing every night. So I think these are the issues out there that they've got to sort through. And I think that's part of where we go back to our original quote of Andrew Burnett, I think, started off with, "This is how we play." Everybody, all these new guys have got to adapt and play this way, and we'll be okay. And that struggle was with, hey, they may not be able to win. This may not be the best way to win with this group. We may have to adjust this system. And so I think that's been a process that's gone on throughout the season.
The Predators are back in action tonight, looking for their fourth consecutive win at the Shark Tank against the San Jose Sharks. Puck drop at 9:30, pregame at 8:30, right here on 102.5, 106.3. The game. We will bid adieu to Willie Donick as he prepares for that game. Jake Lyman will sit in with me for the remainder of the show. We will get back into the NFL. There's a very important question that we have for the Tennessee Titans, and I know you all have that same question as well. We will do that next. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3. The game.
All right. As I exit and head for the Shark Tank here for morning skate out here in San Jose, I will tell you about Lee Company, proud sponsor of the Nashville Predators. Our radio coverage. Stay up late with us tonight. It's going to kick off at 8:30, and we're going to have a good time with the Predators and the Sharks tonight. And so it'll be brought to us by Lee Company. Meanwhile, Lee Company is all you need when it comes to the needs of your home. General maintenance, and of course, the bread and butter things that make your house run: your heating, your cooling, your plumbing, your electrical system. So they have one encompassing program that helps all of those things. It's called the Home Maintenance Plan. You pay a small monthly fee. You get annual checkups for those four systems: heating, cooling, plumbing, electric. And when there are repairs that need to be made, you get discounts on those repairs. It's a great way to go. It's what we use in the Donick house. We have for a long time with our relationship with Lee Company. In fact, they helped us when it was time to put in a new air conditioning / furnace. They were the ones that spearheaded the whole operation, and we enjoyed that process immensely. So with that said, just give Lee Company a call, 615-567-1000 or leecompany.com, 615-567-1000 or leecompany.com.
D. Mace Finnegan and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. The D's are gone. Derek's not here. Willie's not here. But the V is, I'm here, as is Jake Lyman. Jake Lyman, I guess, well, David's here. He's a D as well.
We're back. Day 2.
Yes. Jake Lyman. Sorry, I didn't mean to forget about you, David. You are a D after all.
It's fine. I get it. I'm behind the glass. I don't really talk that much. It's okay.
You're like a fish in an aquarium. We see you. I don't know if you see us.
Well, I definitely see you guys.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's kind of creepy. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, Jake Lyman is here. Jake was kind enough to join us on pinch hitting duty yesterday. He is back for the remainder of the program. There is a very important question, Jake Lyman, that the Titans have yet to answer. And a lot of Titans fans are wondering, who the hell is going to play wide receiver for this team next season?
It's a great question.
Because
It
Calvin
really is.
Ridley, we know they have Calvin Ridley. Traylon Burks is there somewhere, but can we all really count on Traylon Burks at this point? The answer is no.
Maybe. I mean,
Nick Westbrook-Akine is out on the free agent market. We talked to Teron Davenport yesterday. He said that other teams are going to be willing to pay Nick Westbrook-Akine more than the Titans are probably going to be willing to pay Nick Westbrook-Akine, but that might change if they get left without any dance partners on the wide receiver market. Paul Kaharski, at his website, before free agency began, he was looking at players at specific positions who the Titans could target in free agency. He had 3 players under wide receiver, 2 of which have been signed. Josh Palmer of the Chargers has signed a 3-year, $36 million deal, $18 million guaranteed with the Buffalo Bills. So Josh Palmer, unavailable. Dyami Brown of the Commanders signed a 1-year, $10 million deal worth up to $12 million with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So of the 3 receivers that Paul Kaharski said the Titans could hone in on, 2 of them are off the board. The third is Van Jefferson. As far as I know, Van Jefferson has not been signed in free agency. Van Jefferson at this point of his career seems like maybe the second week of free agency type of guy. But I really don't know, Jake, who is going to be playing wide receiver. Now, they could draft one. They could draft a receiver with that second round pick. They could get a good receiver for that. But in terms of veterans, slim pickings, man, they need to figure that out.
Yeah, it kind of feels like the Titans almost have to trade down in the second round because all signs, again, pointing to Cam Ward being the first overall pick. Titans won't be able to get that haul of draft picks that would replenish maybe an extra second or maybe replace the third that you traded for L'Jarius Sneed. So probably going to have to trade down in the second because wide receiver is not the only position where there's a lot of question marks. Edge rusher, who's going to rush the passer for this team on the outside? There's really Arden Key, if they don't release him at some point, might be able to get a couple of sacks here and there, but you need somebody to rush the passer too. So I would think the Titans are going to have to trade back in the second round, maybe into the 40s somewhere. You could take a wide receiver there, and they've talked about how deep the edge rush class is. Maybe you get an edge rusher in the third round. But I wouldn't hate adding one of these older, past their prime kind of guys on a 1-year deal. We were talking in the break. Stephon Diggs is still out there. He's coming off a torn ACL. Maybe not the guy you want, but like an Amari Cooper wouldn't be terrible. Diop's not coming back.
Maybe he'll rediscover his love of the game that he lost in Tennessee in the first place.
Come back to Nashville where he said that he didn't feel like he belonged on the field anymore.
Distance makes the heart grow fonder, I've heard.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Williams is one who's out there who I wouldn't hate taking a flyer on because he is a different type of receiver than what the Titans already have in Calvin Ridley. Ridley's more of your route runner speed threat. Williams could be your 50-50 ball guy to just toss it up. I wouldn't hate a Mike Williams addition at a low cost on a 1-year deal. But you're right. The Titans need to make a move there. I think if the Titans want to call this a successful free agency, and there's not a ton of big ticket names still out there, I think you still need an addition at safety, edge, and wide receiver. They don't have to be flashy names, but you need to at least add competent starting level bodies into those rooms over the next couple of days just to feel decent heading into the draft where you don't feel like you have to get a starter at multiple positions when you're already taking a quarterback first overall.
So among the notable names on the wide receiver market who are unsigned as we say this, Amari Cooper, who ended the season with the Bills, he's 30 years old. Stephon Diggs, who played for the Texans last season, he's 31 years old. I thought Darius Slayton might be an interesting choice, but he re-signed with the Giants.
Yeah, how about the Giants not giving Saquon Barkley 3 years and $38 million last year, but
giving
signing Darius Slayton to
basically the same
the
thing.
exact same deal?
Makes sense, right?
Keenan Allen, who played with the Bears last season, he's available. He's 32. DeAndre Hopkins is available, but we know that's not going to happen. I haven't seen if Tyler Lockett has been re-signed.
I don't think he has. I think he's still out there.
Right, but what you're talking about, as you said, Jake, you're talking about players in their early to mid 30s who are not what they once were. And one thing we know is that although Calvin Ridley, I think Calvin Ridley has it in him to be a solid number one receiver. If you're not bringing back Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, and I do wonder as the chairs start filling in around the league, if the Titans are willing to go beyond what they were comfortable with Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, because they know him. He's been successful here. You're going to overpay him. You might play him in a role that he's probably not suited for, higher in the lineup, so to speak. But I thought maybe the Titans would strike on one of these secondary young-ish receivers, but they're all gone.
Yeah, and I think the Titans are going to try and bring Nick Westbrook-Ikhine back, but he's coming off a season when you score as many touchdowns as you did, that his price is going to be higher than it would have been, obviously, if he had his usual season last year. And it also doesn't help that Mike Vrabel is now the head coach of the New England Patriots and seemingly has a blank check that he can hand out to whoever he wants, spending over $200 million already in free agency. So I have a feeling it's going to be tough to get him back or at least offer him the most money, but we'll see. Honestly, I'd be okay if Nick Westbrook-Ikhine walked and you brought in a different veteran wide receiver for about the same price. I don't think Nick Westbrook-Ikhine is moving the needle all that much. He's a wide receiver 3. You could probably get a wide receiver 3 with a little more experience and maybe can be another leader in that room to add to Calvin Ridley and a draft pick if Nick Westbrook-Ikhine ends up getting more money than he's worth on the open market.
One texter says, I think Lockett would be a great, safe wide receiver for Cam Ward. This is the Ringers scouting report on Tyler Lockett. The Seahawks released Lockett after a terrific 10-year run in Seattle, where he was one of the most underrated wide receivers in the NFL. Having said that, he's definitely slowed down in recent years. Lockett's 600 yards receiving in 2024 was his lowest total since 2017. On the right team, he could still fill the savvy vet who knows how to get open role, but he's unlikely to end up with much more than a 1-year agreement, which for the Titans, signing a veteran receiver to a 1-year deal, that's probably what they should be doing.
Yes, and a lot of these signings, if they make them, are going to feel like Tyler Boyd last year, like where it's a guy, you kind of know what you're getting. You're not going to sign anybody at this point of the names out there that are going to go put up 1,000-yard season. You're looking for a guy who can be a wide receiver 3 depth kind of piece who you hope puts up 40 catches for 500 yards and scores a few touchdowns. I think you're okay with that. You're probably going to have to use a draft pick at wide receiver, which you've boxed yourself into a corner with this by trading away A.J. Brown, missing on Treylon Burks, and all of the other missteps the Titans have made at wide receiver over the last couple of years. So you really don't have a ton of options. I think you're looking for a depth piece here, and you're hoping that you can pick a wide receiver on day 2 in April who can end up being a wide receiver 2 behind Calvin Ridley.
One texter says, Ben, on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, says, if their number 2 is overpaying NWI, Cam Ward is likely going to struggle unless we get a legit tight end. And I will say this. I was on board the Chigakonkwo train after his rookie season because I thought he was incredibly efficient. But I think we've come to learn that Chigakonkwo, he's a guy.
Right.
I'm wondering what the Titans can do to improve at tight end, or if they even want to make an addition at tight end. I haven't seen a lot of tight ends signed yet. I saw Evan Engram was visiting some teams. He had some big seasons in Jacksonville. Jawan Johnson, I'm not sure, has been re-signed. He was with the Saints for the past couple of years. Prototypical tight end. I would feel better about having one of those players than Chigakonkwo. I think at this point we know that Chigakonkwo is not going to make a significant impact in terms of helping this offense.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of hope for the tight ends currently on the roster for the Titans, but I also don't have a lot of hope for anybody who's available out there. Evan Engram, I think, would be a fine addition. He's not going to block for you, but he could end up being a safety blanket for Cam Ward. Andrew on our text line says, with the 49ers blowing things up, could the Titans make a trade for Ayuk or Kittle? My question would be, what are you trading? The front office has already said that they want 30 picks over the next 3 years and 12 in the top 100. You're already behind the 8 ball with that, not having a 3rd round pick this year. So my question would be, what would you trade? Sure, if you could get George Kittle for a 6th round pick, I'd do it, but I don't think that's what the asking price would be from the 49ers. I do think there's a good chance George Kittle, when he enters free agency next year, comes to Nashville. He lives in Nashville, good friends with Philip Forsberg, but you're not going to be able to get him this year. So honestly, I think the Titans are kind of in a tough position where, yeah, the tight ends on their roster aren't very good, but you have too many other holes to spend any significant draft capital or and there's not really anybody in free agency to make it any better this offseason. So you're kind of stuck with what you got.
Do you guys think that y'all could go after, or the Titans could go after Kyle Juszczyk?
He's a fullback, right?
Yeah. What would the point be?
Because he just got released. I mean, it's a good safety option for whoever.
But does Callahan's offense they barely use the tight end. Like Juszczyk is a good football player, but it has to be in the right system. It feels like the Titans would be trying to fit a square peg in a round hole if you try to bring Kyle Juszczyk in.
One texter says, perfectly fine with Ridley, Lockett, and a young wide receiver in the 2nd round in the draft, especially if it's true with the depth of edge in the draft. So maybe we've talked some people into Tyler Lockett, but there are plenty of notable veteran receivers out there. Stephon Diggs, Amari Cooper, Tyler Lockett. It'll be curious to see what their market is. One texter asks about a wide receiver who was in the news, I believe, yesterday, and I would like to discuss him coming up next. 615-737-1025. Your thoughts on the state of the Titans and wide receivers. Is there a wide receiver available in free agency that you would like the Titans to pursue? There are also, of course, wide receivers in the draft that the Titans could select. So what are your thoughts on the state of the Titans wide receiver room as it currently stands? We'll get to those next. 615-737-1025. Tune into 1025, 1063, The Game, for updates of the SEC men's basketball tournament Wednesday through Friday. Presented by Toyota, Guinness, the newcumberland.com, Volunteer Hose and Gasket, and Sloan's Motorcycle and ATV. This week's Nashville's best deal is Boomba's Pizza and Watch Bar, just in time for the SEC tournament. Score half off a $30 gift card and enjoy their award-winning pizza and handcrafted beverages. Visit them in Nashville, Spring Hill, and Murfreesboro. Visit theGameNashville.com/deals now while supplies last. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan here with you, asking a very important question to the Tennessee Titans. Who's going to catch the ball next season? Because the Titans have not addressed that yet in free agency. There, of course, is also the draft. Soon it will be the draft. Thankfully, it will be the draft. One texter on our text line did bring up an interesting name. Cooper Kupp. One texter says, would you go after Cooper Kupp when he gets released? It was reported yesterday that the LA Rams plan to release Cooper Kupp when the NFL's new season starts Wednesday if they can't find a trade partner. And remember, the Rams signed Devontae Adams. So they've been trying to find a taker for Cooper Kupp. Clearly, they haven't been able to. So if he, according to Adam Schefter, if the Rams can't trade him by tomorrow, I guess, they plan to release him. Jake, your thoughts on Cooper Kupp if he becomes a free agent?
I'd love it. I think if you're drafting Cam Ward, who's a better safety net, safety valve to have for him over the middle of the field than Cooper Kupp? I know he's not Triple Crown Cooper Kupp from a couple of years ago, but that's a dude who just knows how to get open, and I think he would pair well with Calvin Ridley. You're going to give Cam Ward a deep threat down the field, but also give him a guy who's still one of the better route runners in the slot and can make plays for you. I would love to get Cooper Kupp. Spot has his market value calculated at 2 years, $22 million. I think you could even give him 2 for 25 if that's what it takes. It might take a little more, but it's not like you're strapped for cash right now. You're not really close to the cap. You can overpay a little bit for Cooper Kupp to get him in here. If you head into this season with a trio of Ridley, a day 2 pick, and Cooper Kupp, I think that's a solid top 3. You need some depth behind it, but I think if you have those 3 guys as your starters, I feel pretty good about that with a rookie quarterback.
So Cooper Kupp signed a 3-year contract extension worth $80.1 million after his record-breaking 2021 season when he was the Triple Crown winner. He led the NFL in receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns. He is scheduled to count $29.8 million against the cap next season and $27.3 million in 2026. His guaranteed salary next season is only $5 million, and he has no guaranteed money on the final year of the contract in 2026. Yada, 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 yada. So I can understand why teams would be hesitant to trade for Cooper Kupp, considering he is no longer at that Triple Crown level. He's had a hard time staying healthy. So if you are a Titans fan who does not want the Titans to sign injured players, well, Cooper Kupp has been dealing with some injuries. So you might have to swallow it there a little bit. But when this news came out, Jake, I talked about it with Derek, and Derek was vehemently opposed to the idea of Cooper Kupp. But I think that was because it would require a trade.
Yes.
I wonder what Derek would think now that he would be available on the free agent market. If the quarterback carousel, and we will get into that later in the program, if the quarterback carousel has shown us that the Titans are likely drafting Cam Ward with the number 1 pick in the draft next month, you want to make sure that you provide him with as many sure-handed receivers as you possibly can. And despite Cooper Kupp's recent struggles with injuries and such, he can still catch the ball.
Right.
You're not expecting him to be Triple Crown winning Cooper Kupp. But I am hard-pressed to think of another receiver who can be, as you said, that safety blanket, that security blanket for a rookie quarterback than Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, and the names that we listed off in the last segment, Stephon Diggs coming off a torn ACL, Keenan Allen at 33 years old, Mike Williams. I would much rather have Cooper Kupp at 32 on a 2-year deal. Like, I understand you're not getting Cooper Kupp in his prime anymore, but I think he is out of the options that might be available, I think he's the best. The question is, what does Cooper Kupp want? He's already got a Super Bowl ring. He's already got a Super Bowl MVP. He's got a Triple Crown at wide receiver. Does he want to chase another Super Bowl? In which case, he probably would not come here. But if he's just searching for another decently sized contract, I wouldn't mind the Titans ponying up a little bit more to try and get Cooper Kupp in here. And again, it looks like, again, we're going off of all of the smoke signals right now. Titans didn't go after one of the top level veteran quarterbacks. You go get the top tackle on the market, Dan Moore. You're trying to shore up things around a possible number one pick at quarterback. Again, like you said, I can't think of many other safety blankets I'd rather have than Cooper Kupp if he becomes available on the free agent market.
Cooper Kupp has missed 18 games since the Rams won the Super Bowl. But, and I think, I don't recall off the top of my head what the nature of those injuries were. So I can't, so like, for example, you mentioned Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs is coming off a season-ending torn ACL. Not all injuries are created equal. It appears that Cooper Kupp dealt with an ankle injury or multiple ankle injuries over the past couple of years. So would you be more comfortable with a receiver with a history of ankle issues or a receiver coming off a torn ACL?
Ankle issues, probably. I mean, I'm just glad it's not hamstring because that seems to be the issue that every Titans receiver has when they come here, draft or free agent. But looking at his stats the last couple of years, I was saying last segment that I think what the Titans should be looking for is a veteran who's going to end up with 40 to 50 catches, 500, 600 yards. The last 3 years, even missing 5+ games over each of the last 3 seasons, Cooper Kupp has had at least 700 yards and 5 touchdowns. Even if you get 600 yards and 5 touchdowns, I think that's a solid year for Cooper Kupp. Now, he has gotten close to 100 targets in each of the last 3 years, despite the injuries. I know you're not getting Cooper Kupp that had I always forget how ridiculous his numbers were in 2021. 145 catches, 1,947 yards, and 16 touchdowns. That is not the Cooper Kupp you're getting. But I would take a Cooper Kupp that gives you 50 catches, 650 yards, and 6 touchdowns. I think pair that with another good season from Calvin Ridley and a young wide receiver as well that you get in the draft. I think that puts the Titans in a pretty good spot.
One texter says, I want to say one of Cooper Kupp's injuries was a hamstring. You are correct. He did deal with a hamstring injury, but he also dealt with ankle injuries as well. David in Arkansas says, if the Titans really want Kupp and are not worried about the money, do you think the Rams would take a 6th-round pick just to get something back instead of nothing? Well, if the Titans have intel, as it's out there now, that the Rams are going to cut him if they don't have a taker by tomorrow, then why trade something?
Yeah,
just wait.
I guess the reason to trade would be to take the decision out of Cooper Kupp's hands. But I also find it hard to believe that the Rams would not consult Cooper Kupp on where they're sending him. And I don't want to take on a $30 million cap hit for Cooper Kupp. Like, I understand there's the people who say the cap is fake, and the Titans do have a lot of cap space, but $29.8 million on the cap makes it a lot harder to manage. You become a lot less flexible when you're taking on a 32-year-old wide receiver with a $30 million cap hit. I don't see anybody ponying up to trade for that. I think the Titans should be interested. The question is Cooper Kupp interested? If he wants to go beyond a contender, I don't think he's going to come here. But who knows? I believe, did he work with Callahan at some point? Was Callahan in LA?
I don't think
he was.
He worked with Matthew Stafford.
Right, that's what I was thinking
with
of.
the
Yes,
Lions,
with the Lions.
But
Yes,
he
so
did not work with the
so
Rams.
no connection there. But
what's one thing we learned from Myles Garrett this week? It's all about the money. That's
Right.
all that matters. That's all that matters. Myles Garrett he was going on tour during Super Bowl media week, going on every podcast and radio show known to man, talking about how he did not want to play for the Cleveland Browns anymore. And then they gave him all the money. And he's like, I'll play for the Cleveland Browns again. Sure.
Yeah. 2 days before he signs that deal, there were the reports that the owner won't even speak with Myles Garrett.
Right.
And it's just like, hey, money solves everything.
Right.
DK Metcalf signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers and he wanted to go to California.
He goes,
exactly. He wanted to go to a warm weather climate. So he chose Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
He said his two qualities were that he wanted in a trade destination were warm weather with a stable quarterback situation. He went to Pittsburgh, who has no idea who their starting quarterback is going to be next
and it
year.
gets a bit frigid in Pittsburgh
Just a little bit.
during the winter, as I come to understand it. So money talks. So I hear that, because whenever we talk about a trade or a signing, it's, well, why would they want to come here? Why would they want to play for the crappy Titans? Well, the crappy Titans might give them a lot more money.
You have to pay the "you suck" tax, but if
Yes.
the Titans do pay it, I think that there is a number that would get Cooper Kupp to come to Nashville.
Absolutely. And as you said, he's at a point of his career. He's been the top receiver in the NFL. He's won the Super Bowl. This is like the anti-Barry Trotz thing. I don't want you to come to Nashville to retire. I want you to come here to win. But Cooper Kupp might just come here to retire, and that's okay.
And if you sign him to a 2-year deal and he's good enough for 1 year, and again, this is under the assumption that Cam Ward is going to be the starting quarterback next year, I think that is good for the development of a young quarterback to have him, even if it's just for 1 year. And then if the second year he ends up kind of slipping towards retirement and just being just a guy out there, that's fine. Again, I don't think even if you do have to pay the "you suck" tax, I don't think the number's going to be insane for Cooper Kupp. I would say maximum you're paying $15 million a year. And if somebody goes over that, then I think you say, that's fine, we'll move on. But I think if you could get Cooper Kupp for 2 years and under $30 million, I think you do it.
Right on cue. WB and Thompson Station. He's not going to a last place team. Why would you? Again, it's all
money.
about the money. Players will put up with a lot of crap if they're getting paid a lot of money to do it. So Cooper Kupp might come to Tennessee in our hypothetical scenario, and he might lose a lot, but he's going to make a lot of money, and he gets to live in our wonderful city.
And again, he's already got the Super Bowl. He's got the accolades. I think this would be different. Like Stephon Diggs might be a different story where he's still looking for a championship. Maybe he would want to go to a team like the Chiefs or like the Eagles or the 49ers or something like that, where he feels like he can contend immediately. Cooper Kupp's already got the ring on his finger. I think you would have an easier time convincing him to come play here than maybe some of those players who still have that chip on their shoulder of wanting to win a championship.
615-737-1025. Your wish list for the Titans at wide receiver. It can be a veteran free agent. It can be a player in the draft. You tell us who you want to catch balls for the Tennessee Titans. And again, just remember, it's all about the money. People will put up with a lot of garbage if they're getting paid well to do it. I'm just saying. 615-737-1025. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. D-Mace, Fingen, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan here with you. Derek Mason out sick again today. We expect him to be back tomorrow as we begin our SEC Watch Party Tour. A reminder, you can catch us at Mellow Mushroom on Broadway tomorrow, Assembly Food Hall across the street from Bridgestone Arena on Thursday, and the Pub in the Gulch on Friday. We will be broadcasting from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. all 3 days on location. Come hang out, have some food, drink some stuff, watch some basketball, all the things. So Derek is getting some rest, so he is ready and raring to go for our SEC Watch Party Tour. And, of course, Willie Donick in San Jose with the Predators and Sharks tonight at 9:30. Pregame at 8:30 right here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. All right. So we have some suggestions from our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Caleb texted and said he wouldn't be upset with Amari Cooper. How do you feel about Amari Cooper, Jake, and his potential fit with the Tennessee Titans?
I don't hate it. I think that would be out of the trio of older wide receivers who are currently on the market with Diggs and Keenan Allen. I think Amari Cooper would be my favorite, but those are all kind of the same to me. I wouldn't hate Amari Cooper. I think if you, again, not as good as Cooper Kupp, but if you went into the season and your top three receivers were Calvin Ridley, Amari Cooper, and a day 2 draft pick, I would think you're sitting in a decent spot. But, I don't think Amari Cooper really moves the needle too much for this team.
Yeah, he didn't have a tremendous impact in Buffalo. He had his moments.
He was fine,
but he certainly didn't have the intended impact as when they traded for him. Chris and Dixon says, remember D-Hop, I assume, meaning that DeAndre Hopkins. People were like, well, why would he sign with the Titans? And he did because of the money.
It's always the money.
It's always about the money. Your happiness is your money's happiness is all that's money. I can't remember the Simpsons line. I'll work on it. I'm sorry, Chase, if you're listening. I disappointed you. Let's talk about the draft, because now that Jared has accepted that Sam Darnold is no longer going to be the quarterback of the Tennessee Titans, and he accepted that late last week, but when it became official yesterday, he accepted that fact. So I have to find another player so whenever I brought up Sam Darnold, I always mentioned that when Jared hears that name, he gets a tingle in his loins, because I was trying to find an appropriate way to say a certain thing. I feel like that sensation is now with Matthew Golden.
Correct.
Jared Stillman loves himself some Matthew Golden. Our friend Gover on our text line, also loves Matthew Golden. Matthew Golden seems to be the apple of Titans fans' eyes when it comes to a potential young receiver. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Jake. I don't think the Titans are in position to draft Matthew Golden.
No,
unless they were to move down a couple of times.
Right. Unless you're trading down into the teens, I don't think you're putting yourself in a spot to get Matthew Golden. He might be the first receiver off the board. Like, there's an outside chance. Ted McMillan has been slipping. I still would, and I'm not including Travis Hunter in this. We don't really know what Travis Hunter is. I'm going to lean cornerback, but true wide receivers, I think Ted McMillan and Matthew Golden are kind of in that top tier of those guys are for sure going in the first round. So for the Titans, unless you're trading back a couple of times from one, or you're trading back up, which would again cost you some more draft capital, you're probably not getting Matthew Golden.
So there's one receiver you mentioned during the break who appears to be slipping, who I'm surprised he is, just based on what I know of him.
Yeah.
And that's Luther Burden out of Missouri.
I love Luther Burden. I remember watching him I guess it would have been his sophomore season at Vanderbilt 2 years ago. And you left the building saying, yeah, that dude's an NFL receiver. And I don't think he had as explosive of a final season at Missouri as people would have liked. I know that Brady Cook was injured a little bit too. But I still think that dude he's going to be a solid NFL wide receiver. Emeka Egbuka would be another guy that's kind of in that range of, hey, maybe he slips into round 1, but could be available on those first couple picks of round 2. I don't think the Titans could trade back from 35 and get Egbuka or Burden. But if one of them are sitting there at 35, I was saying to David, I was like, I would find it really hard to not run the ticket in if one of those guys are there. Yes, you're probably giving up the opportunity to draft maybe a third round edge rusher, but I don't know. I would be in for Luther Burden at 35 and Cam Ward at 1, which is funny because I was looking for a mock draft to see where Luther Burden was going, and USA Today's latest one had Cam Ward at 1, Luther Burden at 35. Sign me up.
So help me understand why his stock seems to be plummeting. I can't say I've watched a lot of him very closely, but I know the name, and I know that a lot of people thought highly of him that know this stuff.
Yeah, and when you looked at they had the way too early mock drafts from last year, he was considered to be a top 5 pick. People were obviously looking at Shedeur Sanders was towards the top. Tet McMillan was up there too. The big name, James Pierce was projected to go number 1 in a lot of those. But I can't really understand it. I'm wondering if maybe there's something in his interviews that people don't like. I'm looking here. So like this CBS Sports Big Board has Luther Burden at 20. Luther Burden III is a yak monster who can create easy separation out of his breaks. He's got some extremely reliable hands with a drop rate under 5% each of the past 2 seasons. So I don't really understand why he's falling when heading into the year, he was considered to be pretty much a consensus top 10 guy, and he's fallen. Tet McMillan is slipping. I think there's been questions of the quote unquote, does he love ball?
Oh boy.
Which is always a fun one around draft season.
You don't want that.
But for Luther Burden, I haven't really seen anything that would really signal why he's falling. He just is. And if he falls to 35, I would love to see him in the two-tone blue.
So with Tet McMillan, are there concerns that his focus is on other things other than football?
I guess that's it. When you look at him athletically and the way he plays, people have kind of called him a Drake London clone, like guy who can make the contested catches, but also has the ability to separate. I like Tet McMillan as a player, but again, I think he's in a similar range of Matthew Golden where feasibly it just does not make sense for the Titans to be in the range to pick him. But I like him as a player. I've seen him slipping as far as like mid-teens when heading into draft season in like January, he was considered in that top 5 guys of like, all right, quarterbacks, then it's going to be Hunter and Carter, and then Tet McMillan's probably your next guy. He's not in that range anymore, but he's still probably high teens, maybe falls into the 15, 16, 17 range.
Who are some of your other favorite receivers who could realistically be available to the Titans, either with that second pick or later in the draft?
I know that he got a little bit of flack at the combine for his promises that he was going to run in the 4.1s. But I do like Bond. Yeah. Isaiah Bond from Texas. I think he's a good player. And I think if he had just not said anything and then run a 4.41, I don't think anybody would have really been saying much about it, but he did kind of overpromise, underdeliver at the combine. I do like Isaiah Bond. Watching that Texas offense in the playoff, yes, Matthew Golden stood out, but so did Isaiah Bond. And I think you can make an argument that maybe Isaiah Bond was the better receiver on that team, even though he didn't test as well. So I like him. I think there are going to be options in the second round for the Titans at wide receiver. My favorite is Luther Burden. Emeka Egbuka is good. I mean, that's a guy he's going to be safety net kind of guy. I'm not saying Cooper Kupp level player, but he's going to be a consistent, reliable player out of Ohio State. I think if you want Burden or Egbuka, you probably have to stick and pick at 35. But there are other options if you trade back. Jaden Higgins is another one who stood out. Savion Williams from TCU. Who was another one that I just saw?
Derek Love. I had Derek do his favorite wide receiver prospects last week. He loves Emeka Egbuka.
Yes,
big fan of him.
And I like Emeka Egbuka too. I mean, he's been in that Ohio State room where seems like everybody who comes out of that wide receiver room turns to gold over the last couple of
And
years.
he leads the program in receiving yards and receptions, if
Right.
I'm not mistaken.
And he's been around all of those guys. I believe he was in the same class as Jackson Smith and Jigba, I think, but he obviously just stuck around a
So
couple
would he
more
have
years.
played with Garrett Wilson as well?
Maybe I'm 1 year ahead.
Yeah.
But
Chris
Chris
Olave.
Olave was in
Yeah.
that room. I think there's a lot to like about Emeka Egbuka. Maybe not as flashy as Luther Burden, but I think you could get reliable contributions from day one if he was to join the team.
Whenever I hear the stuff about, does this player love, this is a tangent, but whenever I hear the stuff about, does this player love the game? I know that there's a lot of that with Shedeur Sanders, right? Some of it's coded language, but there's a lot about, hey, does this player really love football? Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't want the athlete I don't want the athletes to only be solely focused on football. Now, I'm not saying that they should, not study their playbook and not do all of that, but I don't know if I want a player who's wired in that way, where their life revolves entirely around football.
And it's lying season, so there's a very good chance that is a team picking around 8, 9, 10 who really wants Tet McMillan, who interviewed him and immediately sent that out to the media to try and get him to slip. Because it is lying season. There are smoke screens. I mean, there was all the talk about the CJ Stroud S2 score 2 years ago. I think there's a really good chance that was the Titans putting that out there because they wanted CJ Stroud to get past the Texans at 2. So I think all the stuff that comes out around now about these prospects, maybe it is true. And maybe 3 years down the road, Tet McMillan has been released or traded because he didn't put in the work. But I find it hard to believe that a guy who was a consensus top 5 pick for the last year and a half is falling down draft boards now because people are just finding out that his heart's not completely in it.
Or maybe he just has other interests other than football.
Right.
That's okay.
And that is perfectly fine.
Yes.
Steph Curry is now taking another job while he's still playing in the NBA. I think it's okay to do some other things while you're still a professional athlete.
I don't know about that one, guys. Come on. This gotta be ball. Only ball only.
Yes. Do you love ball? Wasn't that the Titans thing for a couple of years? Do they love ball? Then they signed Vic Beasley, who did not love ball.
I think it was pretty clear he probably didn't even like ball.
Yes. That is true. One texter says, I need Cam and Egbuka in my veins. Inject it into my veins, this texter says.
If you want an exciting training camp and an exciting year, whether it's wins or losses, if you go number 1 overall pick for quarterback and take a wide receiver early in round 2, that's what the Bengals did 2020. They took Burrow first, and it might have been 33 or 34. They took T. Higgins. So if you want an exciting team, that's the way to do it. You go do it. And Brian Callahan was a part of that. So maybe that's what the plan is to go quarterback at 1, go big time wide receiver early in the second round.
615-737-1025. We will switch gears here to the quarterback position because there have been a lot of interesting contracts handed out around the NFL, how it relates to the Titans. And there was a name that was out there briefly yesterday in association with the Titans that was quickly refuted. We'll get into that next. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063, The Game. D. Mace Finnegan and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership where the buzz is always about great service. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan here with you. Derek Mason out today, hopefully back tomorrow. Willie Donick with the Predators and San Jose. Predators and Sharks tonight, 9:30 puck drop, 8:30 pregame right here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. So, Jake, a lot of movement in the quarterback world now that the legal tampering period is underway. Yesterday, we mentioned on the program that Sam Darnold signed a 3-year deal, $100.5 million with the Seattle Seahawks. Right before we went off the air, Justin Fields, 2 years, $40 million with the New York Jets. Some of the other notable moves, I should say. Yesterday, I talked myself into the idea of Zach Wilson for roughly 40 minutes. And fortunately for me and all of you, Zach Wilson signed with the Miami Dolphins. So Zach Wilson signed a 1-year, $6 million deal with the Miami Dolphins. Josh Dobbs joins the ex-Titans party in New England. 2 years, $8 million for Josh Dobbs with Mike Vrabel and the Patriots. Jarrett Stidham remains with the Broncos. 2 years, $12 million. Nick Mullins signs with the Jaguars, 2 years, $6.5 million. The interesting one today, however, Jake, Daniel Jones signs a 1-year, $14 million deal with the Indianapolis Colts. Now, if you're Anthony Richardson, you better beat Daniel Jones for the starting job, or you're probably toast.
They are about to have the ultimate mid-off in Indianapolis for the starting quarterback job. I mean, you're right. It's Anthony Richardson. It's like, hey, we're trying to give you every chance we can. We got to bring in somebody to compete with you, though, because you haven't stayed healthy, you haven't played all that well. Here's Daniel Jones, who, as much as Daniel Jones, he took the Giants to the playoffs. He won a road playoff game against the Vikings. So,
which was probably, honestly, I wonder if the Giants, if they could go back. What if they lost that playoff?
Yeah. I mean, it's like Sam Darnold with the Vikings. If Sam Darnold had beaten the Rams in that playoff game, I bet he at least gets tagged by the Vikings, because you don't give up on a guy who just took you to the divisional round of the playoffs like that. Titans did it with Ryan Tannehill after they went to the AFC Championship game. I wonder if the Giants do lose that game, if Daniel Jones was shown the street a little bit earlier. But yeah, that quarterback room is, I think the Titans have to be feeling pretty good about their quarterback room as it stands right now compared to that one, because Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones, there's not a whole lot to be excited about there. It feels like the Colts will be trying to enter the Arch Manning sweepstakes and add another Manning to the Colts legacy next year.
Another move that was made that was not a signing, the Eagles traded Kenny Pickett to the Browns. And that doesn't mean that Kenny Pickett is going to start for the Browns, but Kenny Pickett does have plenty of starting experience. I wonder what that could mean for the Browns, who have the second pick in the NFL draft. I thought that was an interesting move by the Eagles and the Browns yesterday.
The way it's starting to feel is, we've talked about it. All the signs are pointing to the Titans taking Cam Ward at 1. It's starting to feel like neither the Browns or the Giants want to take Shedeur Sanders at 2 or 3, because although Kenny Pickett is not an inspiring option, he is a guy who, if they went into the year with him as the starting quarterback, I don't think anybody would. It's not like they're going in with Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who went the other way in that trade. And the Giants seem to be wanting to get Aaron Rodgers in there. I have a feeling that Shedeur Sanders, and I did see this yesterday, that there is talk of Shedeur Sanders possibly having a Will Levis-like slide on draft day. And I'm wondering if Cam Ward goes number 1 and everybody kind of feels like he is the consensus number 1 quarterback, if the Browns and Giants go with the 2 best players in the draft of Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter, and then maybe in the second round you look at a Jackson Dart or a Will Howard or something like that, if you don't like Shedeur Sanders as the primary option as the number 2 quarterback in the draft.
Field Yates did a mini mock draft. He did a top 10 mock draft coming off of free agency. And as you said, Jake, it appears that all signs are pointing toward the Titans drafting Cam Ward at number 1, which Field Yates says in his mini mock as well. He writes, quote, "It seems clear Tennessee will listen to offers for this pick, but there has been no concrete movement on that yet. So I don't necessarily feel that a trade down is imminent. Plus, the Titans have not made any movement on the veteran free agency market at quarterback with names like Sam Darnold and Justin Fields already off the board. They do have Will Levis under contract, but the dynamic Ward would fill their biggest need. He is a crafty innovator with a great arm. He has Travis Hunter going number 2 to Cleveland, Shedeur Sanders number 3 to the Giants." And it's interesting because a lot of the teams we've discussed who also need quarterbacks either have their quarterbacks or seem destined to soon have their quarterback. The Browns traded for Kenny Pickett. Who else is missing a quarterback?
The Giants, the Steelers.
The Giants and the Steelers. And it seems that the Steelers are sweet on Aaron Rodgers, I guess. That's what it certainly sounds like, which might leave Russell Wilson to the Giants. The Raiders needed a quarterback. They traded for Geno Smith. Sam Darnold went to Seattle to replace Geno Smith. So it's
musical chairs.
It is. The Russell Wilson part of this is interesting. Connor Hughes, who reports on the NFL for SNY up in New York, he focuses, of course, on the Jets and the Giants, but covers the league at large for SNY, had a tweet yesterday that just said, sources, the Titans are among the teams interested in Russell Wilson. That was it. No other context. The Titans are among the teams interested in Russell Wilson. Charles Robinson of Yahoo Sports, who of course joins Robbie and Rexroad every week, tweeted this not too long after, recalibrating a bit. Got the sense the Titans don't have strong Russell Wilson interest. I think his market beyond Giants is flat. Cam Ward is definitely still in play in Tennessee, and Browns aren't done at quarterback. They're going to throw several moves at it before it's all over. So that brief glimpse, that brief period of time where the Titans were reportedly interested in Russell Wilson, that move never really made a whole lot of sense to me, just because you're not going to sign Russell Wilson to be the Titans' backup quarterback. He wants to start. Now, if you don't like Cam Ward and you want to throw Russell Wilson in there for a couple of years, I guess that works. But immediately I found it to be a bit of a head-scratching move. Again, it was just reported by Connor Hughes of SNY that the Titans had shown interest in Russell Wilson, which was later refuted by Charles Robinson of Yahoo Sports. But like, it just on its face made no sense to me.
Yeah, my only thought on that was and I know a lot of people have had this conversation about Mike Borgonzi was in Kansas City when they did the Alex Smith transition, had Patrick Mahomes sit for a year. My first thought was maybe they want Russell Wilson to be the Alex Smith in this, and you sign him for a year, take Cam Ward at 1, and let him sit behind for a year and then become the starter in 2026. But when you think about it, Russell Wilson isn't exactly known for being the model teammate that Alex Smith was, I guess I would say. Like,
wasn't there a whole thing with him in Denver where
he had his own office and he was bringing in his own coach to train him? Like, I'm sure Russell Wilson is well liked by his teammates, but I'm not sure that that's something Russell Wilson would sign up for. Like, I think Alex Smith knew at the end of his Chiefs career that, hey, I am the successor to Patrick Mahomes at this point. This is going to be my last year in Kansas City. I can't see Russell Wilson voluntarily signing up and being like, hey, we're going to give you a 1-year deal, but your main job is to mentor Cam Ward, and who cares how many games we win this year. I don't think Russell Wilson would sign up for that. But that was the only way I could see it maybe making sense, is if that was the agreement of like, hey, we're going to still draft Cam Ward, but Russell's going to be our veteran starter for a year. I'm glad that it was not any actual real interest from the Titans, because I think they're probably searching in a lower tier of quarterback than Rodgers and Wilson at this point.
Aaron on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, says, screw wide receiver. We need a decent veteran quarterback. Is Levis really going to back up Ward? Ron on our text line says, for what's left, give me Jacoby Brissett or Aaron Rodgers in draft ward. Well, those are two totally different things. Aaron Rodgers is going to start. Jacoby Brissett at this point in his career is the quintessential veteran who's been around the block. He knows his role. He can be that mentor quarterback.
Right.
So if you're just looking for that player for Cam Ward, again, assuming that the Titans are taking Cam Ward, Jacoby Brissett, he nails it. He's not exciting at all, but he nails it. I mean, here are some of the other quarterbacks who are still available. Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson top the list. Mac Jones is still out there. Gardner Minshew, Jameis Winston, Joe Flacco, Marcus Mariota. And it's funny because I saw some people bring up the idea of Marcus Mariota.
Taylor Lewan put out the tweet.
That's right. That's where I saw Taylor Lewan put it out. And of course, Marcus Mariota wore number 8. Will Levis currently wears number 8. And it reminded me, if I can go on a hockey tangent here for a second, a sidebar, if you will. When the Carolina Hurricanes traded for Mikko Rantanen, he wears number 96. The Hurricanes had a player, Jack Roslovic, who also wears number 96. So when Rantanen showed up, Roslovic gave him the number 96. And as you see a lot of times in other sports, players are willing to pay for that number. I believe Mikko Rantanen purchased Jack Roslovic a Rolex, among other things. And 6 weeks later, Mikko Rantanen gets traded, and Jack Roslovic switches back to 96.
There you go.
So for giving up his number for 6 weeks, he got a designer watch and who knows what else.
It's a great deal.
Good on you, Jack Roslovic. You go, Jack Roslovic. But the idea of what that number switch would be like, I don't think Marcus is going to return. Cooper Rush is still available. Jacoby Brissett, as we mentioned, Drew Lock, Trey Lance, Carson Wentz. Those are some of the notable quarterback names who are still looking for work.
Jameis Winston's intriguing.
The entertainment value
Right.
is off the charts. Robbie Stanley would be a pig in mud. I can't say the actual thing I would normally say. Robbie Stanley would be a pig in mud if the Titans signed Jameis Winston. He loves the entertainment value of Jameis Winston, as many other people do as well. And that's just in terms of the things he says in the huddle and his inspirational speeches and such. But he is a highly entertaining player because you never know what you're going to get. You'll get 30 touchdowns. You're also going to get 30 interceptions.
Yeah. I mean, he did say, I think it was at the Super Bowl, he was doing interviews and somebody asked him about Nashville and he said he would be open to playing here. So I don't know. That one's intriguing. I don't think you would go into the season with him as the starter if you draft Cam Ward. Like Ward would be the starter. Winston would come in surely as the backup. But we saw last year in that game, was it the Browns and Broncos last year on Monday night, where he put up the most Jameis Winston stat line of all time, threw for like 500 yards and 6 touchdowns, but also threw 2 pick sixes. So I would be behind it again, just for the entertainment value. And I also think that's the kind of guy that would be good in the quarterback room for Cam Ward. I mean, he was the number 1 overall pick too. So he knows about the expectations that come with that when you come into a quarterback room. And I also don't think Jameis Winston has the ego to think that he would be placed above Cam Ward. I think Jameis Winston knows that he is a backup now. I think he would be a good fit. I also don't hate Mac Jones. I could get behind Mac Jones as a backup quarterback. The other names aren't all that appetizing. Gardner Minshew would be okay. But I think if I had to pick 2 that I would be fully on board with, Winston and Mac Jones, I think I would be happy with.
I think I would settle for Jacoby Brissett just because
Brissett would be fine.
I feel like of those names, he is I am creating a quarterback out of thin air and I am describing him to you. And he's been in the league for a long time. He has some starting experience, but he's mostly been a journeyman backup who can be there to support a young quarterback. Jacoby Brissett, I feel like would be the player that would
true.
Emerge.
I'd add him to that list too. I think I'd put him with Mac Jones. I'm talking myself into Jameis Winston right now. Like if it got announced, I would be thrilled if Jameis Winston was the signing.
Robbie Stanley has texted me Russ texted me and said, "Bring me Jameis. Screw you, McCorkle Jones." Am I missing something here?
That's Mac's real name.
McCorkle?
Yes.
McCorkle. Yep.
I
That's
don't
his real
want him.
name.
I don't want him anymore. That's ridiculous. McCorkle?
His name is McCorkle.
That's
Yes.
that is ridiculous.
Mr. Jones, how dare you do that to him?
That is ridiculous. We need to have a talk with his parents. And I thought, all right, Jackson Dart's parents. I had you on the top of my list because you gave your son a name with a random X in it for some reason. You're off my list. McCorkle Jones?
His name is Michael McCorkle Jones.
Oh my goodness gracious.
At least
Mac.
it's his middle name.
Yeah.
That
Michael McCorkle Jones, affectionately known as Mac.
I just remember last year when Ole Miss went to Florida and Jackson Dart had a pretty terrible game, if I recall correctly, in Florida's upset win over Ole Miss. I was like, well, this is what he gets for his parents naming him
Jackson
Jackson with an X
and an S.
Yeah. What gives?
I think you-
McCorkle?
Yeah, you could live with like a CKS or just an X. I'm okay with JAXON. That's fine. But yeah, X and
I'm out
S.
on Mac Jones. This McCorkle thing is just
McCorkle's
rocked
too
my-
much for you.
It's rocked my world. No, thank you. I'm out.
Done deal. None.
I'm
no
out.
more.
I am kind of laughing to myself
And
because
for those reasons, I'm out.
I Jameis Winston, I remember when I was in high school and Marcus Mariota had just gotten drafted, I was going to war with Buccaneers fans saying how terrible Jameis Winston was because I thought Marcus was better. Now I'm fully on board. Bring me Jameis Winston.
Just remember this, guys. What's the first 4 letters of Jameis's last name?
Wins.
Hey, do you know what Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota have in common?
What's that?
Their first NFL drives both ended with a touchdown pass to the Titans.
I knew that's what I knew it. I knew you were gonna do that.
615. I am shaken by this McCorkle thing. 615-737-1025. My God, man. I need to do some more research on this. But as they say on Shark Tank, for those reasons, I'm out. 615-737-1025. Who would be your ideal backup quarterback? Let's assume that Cam Ward is being drafted by the Tennessee Titans. Who would you have as his mentor, so to speak? Who would be his backup quarterback? It could be Will Levis if you want it to be, but I doubt it will be. 615-737-1025. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game.
After I say one thing, I want everybody to look at me. I'm going to pass it to coin after I say one thing. Let's go. That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W. How many people want to eat a W tonight? How many eat a W tonight? Come in. That's all I want.
I'm pumped. Eating W's, Jameis Winston.
Can't wait till we're eating W's on Broadway in a couple of months.
Sounds like a marketing opportunity. Just don't make sure was it crab legs?
Yeah, don't steal any crab legs.
Yeah, just make sure it's not a crab legs.
Yep.
Marketing.
Yeah, but there could be some marketing for that. I'm sure Jameis has done his fair share of crab leg commercials. Have you seen the Blake Griffin dunking lobster commercials for Red Lobster?
I have not.
They're saying he's the greatest dunker. Probably he's not the greatest dunker of all time, but they're talking about one of the greatest dunkers of all time and dunking the lobster in the butter sauce. We should get a Jameis Winston Red Lobster campaign going.
I thought Red Lobster was bankrupt.
Maybe they are. They spent it all on Blake Griffin.
I think the problem was the all-you-can-eat shrimp. I think they were hemorrhaging money by the amount of shrimp people were eating that they were giving away for free.
Yeah, I mean, chain seafood restaurants aren't the smartest field to get into, I don't think.
No, but we digress. Joey from Bellevue says they can always bring Mason Rudolph back. Hard pass.
Yeah, gonna say no for that one.
I tried to convince Derek because he was like, it would send such a bad message if you bring back Mason Rudolph. And I said, what about Mason Rudolph, but with a mustache? And he was like, no. I was like, okay. I thought I'd just give it a try.
Jason Dudolph.
I honestly think the Titans should not bring back Mason Rudolph and should trade Will Levis. I think you could find somebody out there who's willing to part with a pick swap somewhere to take Levis on as a reclamation project. Bringing him in as QB3 this year, I'm not really sure the value in that. I mean, look at Liam Cohen down there in Jacksonville, his former offensive coordinator at Kentucky. Maybe you could get the Jaguars to part with a 4th round pick. You send them a 5th, and Will Levis can go be reunited with Mr. Duval.
Ugh, don't get me started on that. David knows the cringe factor when it comes to Liam Cohen saying Duval.
Duval.
Oh, no. Yeah. I had such a hard time with that one when I first saw it. I was like, this is the most cringeworthy thing I've seen in a very long time. So I'm wondering about what the value could be for Will Levis. So Kenny Pickett it was a 5th round pick and Dorian Thompson-Robinson, right?
Yeah.
And I can't remember what was the trade last year
for Kenny Pickett
that went from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia. Like, could you get someone to throw you a mid-round pick, a 4th or a 5th round pick for Will Levis?
I'm wondering if maybe that's how the Titans get back up into the 3rd.
You think someone would part with a 3rd round pick for Will Levis?
Hear me out here. The
Okay.
Titans, they have multiple 4th round picks because of the Ernest Jones trade. Maybe you could send your 4th round pick, which is pretty high up there in the 4th round, and get back into the top 100 if you traded to somebody who's towards the back end of the 3rd. I'm not saying it's likely, but let's see. Last year, that is yesterday's deal. The Steelers traded Kenny Pickett to the Philadelphia Eagles for a 3rd round draft pick and 2 7th round picks. So Kenny Pickett fetched a 3rd round pick last year. I don't know if Levis is worth that much, but I think if you could do a pick swap of, hey, you send the Seahawks 4th or your 4th and get a 3rd back, maybe somebody would do that to take a chance on Levis.
Indy Ben has texted in on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHundy.com. He wants to defend his beloved Colts. He writes, as bad as Richardson was last year, Levis was even worse, and you have no idea what Ward's going to turn into. He could suck as well. I like the Daniel Jones signing as he can run the same type of offense under Steichen if Richardson misses games or declines. People forget how athletic Daniel Jones is, and he did play well when he had a top running back with Saquon Barkley. He has that with Jonathan Taylor and a good offensive line and wide receiver core.
Is this the same good offensive line that just lost 2 of their starters over the past 2 days?
That's a good question.
Hey, guys, don't forget, Daniel Jones did run faster than Lamar Jackson for that one time.
I always want to ask Indy Ben like why he listens to Nashville Sports Talk Radio
Let
so
us know.
religiously, because it's like if you want to hear good things about the Colts, don't listen to a station that covers the Titans. I mean, I think Anthony Richardson is a fantastic athlete, and he's always going to have flashes like that flick of the wrist 80-yard pass he threw at the beginning of last season. But with what you've seen, I don't know if anybody can say that Anthony Richardson is ever going to be consistent enough to be a starting level NFL quarterback. And Daniel Jones, I mean, the Giants gave up on him last year.
And you know how hard it is for me to be down on Daniel Jones. You know where he went to school, right?
He's one of your Duke guys.
He is. And I didn't even understand back then why the Giants used that draft pick on Daniel Jones. And Daniel Jones running clear for a touchdown and then tripping over himself
Yeah.
is the highlight of his.
He still ran fast, okay?
Right.
Daniel Jones is
Not the destination, it's the journey, I
he
suppose.
is a fine quarterback at a backup level. Like, if I think Daniel Jones will probably be in the NFL for the next 7 to 10 years as a backup, which is fine. But to argue that a quarterback room with Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones has more promise than Cam Ward right now, I think is, I mean, Cam Ward, we just don't know. But I would argue that I'd feel better. I would trade Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones for the chance to draft Cam Ward.
David from Watertown said, also, did he really try and say that Jonathan Taylor is the same as Saquon Barkley? I don't think he was saying that. But
Jonathan Taylor's a good running back. He's not Saquon Barkley, but yeah, I think he was trying to say that Daniel Jones, when he had Barkley, was good. He will have a good running back again in Jonathan Taylor. I'll give Indy Ben a pass on that one.
So, Jake, we started the show with taking stock of the Dan Moore signing now that we are 24 hours removed. When we were on the air yesterday and the news broke that Dan Moore had signed a 4-year, $82 million deal, $50 million guaranteed with the Tennessee Titans, the immediate reaction was unenthusiastic, to say the least. Even Teron Davenport, who I rely on Teron for level-headed, even-keeled analysis. Even he seemed to question the signing. I thought one thing that he brought up was, well, a lot of people point out that some of the sacks that Dan Moore allowed were to Trey Hendrickson and Myles Garrett. And he said, well, if you're going to be paid big bucks at left tackle, you need to stop those players, or at least attempt to stop those players. So it does appear, however, that with the benefit of time, with an extra day to marinate on it, that Titans fans understand the signing. They know it's an overpay, but as Jared said yesterday to open his show, you have to overpay in free agency. This was a need for the Titans. They absolutely needed to shore up their offensive line. If you switch J.C. Latham to right tackle, hopefully your tackle position is set. And Jared did say one thing yesterday that I think all of you should be aware of, that you should all keep in mind whenever you think about criticizing this deal. You may never have to hear the right tackle story again. I just want to emphasize this. You may never have to hear the right tackle story again.
And that makes the $80 million worth
and that
it.
makes this all worth it, as far as I'm concerned. If I'm fine with the Titans giving Dan Moore that type of money, if it means I don't have to hear the right tackle story again. So it's a benefit.
I did see
It's a fringe benefit.
Somebody made a joke of everybody keeps talking about how we should give Dan Moore some lenience because he had to face Trey Hendrickson and Myles Garrett. Are we sure that Trey Hendrickson and Myles Garrett aren't so good because they get to face Dan Moore twice a year? And I mean,
we call that the Andre Andre Dillard conundrum.
I still think it's a good deal. Not a good deal as in like they got a steal out of it. No, they overpaid. But what were your options at tackle if you don't sign Dan Moore? Cam Robinson, who is probably one of the biggest roller coaster rides out there at tackle. Super talented, but has shown no signs of consistency over the 3 stops that he's been at in his career. There's really no other. Morgan Moses, I guess, is the name that everybody's putting out there.
He signed for $8 million per season, if I'm
Right.
not mistaken.
But he's 34, and he would only be right tackle. So you'd have to keep J.C. Latham at left tackle. And I kind of like the idea of, and I don't want people to think I'm doing the Bill Callahan will fix it,
I
but
already did that once today.
okay, good. I like the idea of giving Bill Callahan a 26, 27-year-old tackle who's got 66 starts under his belt and seeing if he can work out some of the kinks. There's a difference between trying to turn a 4-year starting left tackle in Dan Moore into an above average to good tackle than there is trying to turn Nicholas Petit-Frere and Jalen Duncan into serviceable tackles. If you're getting serviceable already with Dan Moore, you hope that having an elite offensive line coach is going to rise him to another level. Again, I don't know what your other options were. If you're planning on taking Cam Ward at 1, your only other options were to take Morgan Moses, Cam Robinson, or bet on a second or third round tackle to immediately start for you on the offensive line. So I think this was the best of all of the options, even though there weren't a ton of them.
We have an important update on the McCorkle story. If you missed
I'm excited.
it, I'm out on Mac Jones because I've learned Mac is short for McCorkle. Thanks, Robbie. So this is a story from AL.com. Legally, he's Michael McCorkle Jones, but he was and remains Mac. The plan all along was to name him Michael, but use a shortened version of his middle name, her maiden name, his mom's maiden name, conversationally. I always hated that name because it was so long, the former Holly McCorkle, now Jones, said. But then we decided, well, my family didn't have a boy on their side to carry on McCorkle, so that would be the only McCorkle going through.
All right. I mean, I get it. You gotta pass on the family name, but he will be referred to if he does come here and for some reason gets on the field. I think that will be the interception throwing side of Mac is if he goes really bad, McCorkle's going to the bench, not Mac.
Are you getting Mac or McCorkle?
Right. That's the question.
I don't know how much those planes cost. You know how you see them all the time at the beach and sometimes over NFL stadiums when fans want the owners to fire the coach. Those planes that have the banners hanging.
Right.
If Robbie Stanley has any loose change hanging around, I could see him buying one of those planes, renting one of those planes to fly a big banner that says McCorkle over Nissan Stadium if Mac Jones were indeed part of this team. But again, I'm out. McCorkle doesn't do it for me.
Just from the name, you're out.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I don't really love how he plays football.
That's
615-737-1025. The SEC tournament begins tomorrow. There's a lot of different angles we're going to take when it comes to analyzing this SEC tournament, but I do want to focus on one particular orange-clad team. That's coming up next. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. There we go. That music can mean only one thing. We're mad because it's March. The SEC men's basketball tournament kicks off tomorrow at Bridgestone Arena. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan here with you. A reminder that 102.5, 106.3 The Game will be on the road for SEC watch parties on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. We will be broadcasting live from 9 to 6. We will be at Mellow Mushroom right next door to Bridgestone Arena on Broadway tomorrow. We'll be at Assembly Food Hall on Thursday, right across the street from Bridgestone Arena. And we'll be at the pub in the Gulch on Friday, a short walk from Bridgestone Arena. So if you're going downtown to check out the SEC tournament, join us Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Also, I do want to take this moment. I can't remember who was it. Is it Robbie or Joe who hates One Shining Moment? Or was it Michelle Knezovic?
I think it was Robbie.
Robbie
hates,
doesn't like it.
Yeah, I can't.
I
get
know
behind
Joe
that.
loves it.
I can't get behind that. Yeah, it's fantastic.
It's a
Luther,
great- oh, it's
Luther Vandross,
fantastic.
man. It's
Yeah.
fantastic.
No, it's great.
Then there was that one year they had Jennifer Hudson do it, and we were all like, no, go back to
Go
Luther
back,
Vandross.
yes.
Go back to Luther. Go back to Luther Vandross. But anyway, really excited for this SEC tournament. I know that ESPN certainly is, because they are bringing their A team to call the SEC tournament. Dan Schulman and Jay Billis. I believe College Game Day will be here throughout the week. The SEC tournament is the top tournament in college basketball. Usually that's the ACC, but the ACC having a bit of a down year, to say the least. So the SEC gets the prime real estate on ESPN and, of course, SEC Network. It kicks off tomorrow with a noon tip-off. 16th ranked South Carolina, 9th ranked Arkansas in the opening matchup. Texas against Vanderbilt in the 13-12 matchup. Roughly 2:30 tip. That game you can hear on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. But Jake, we know there are going to be a lot of Kentucky fans here. There will probably be a good amount of Auburn and Alabama fans. But we definitely know there's going to be a lot of Tennessee fans here. That's just the way it is. And I'm curious about Tennessee, not just in this tournament, but in the NCAA tournament. Tennessee got the double bye. They do not play until Friday. They would play the winner of Texas A&M versus either Vanderbilt or Texas. So Tennessee will open the SEC tournament against one of those three teams. Last year in the SEC tournament, they lost by 17 to Mississippi State in the quarterfinal. It ultimately did not matter because the Vols, if I recall correctly, made it to the Elite Eight.
Yep.
Where they lost to Purdue.
Purdue.
To Zach Edey, who shot about 55 free throws. That was a fantastic game. Dalton Knecht and Zach Edey were just trading haymakers. But I know that if Tennessee slips up in this tournament, let's just say that Texas A&M takes care of either Vanderbilt or Texas, and then Texas A&M defeats Tennessee. Oh boy, there's going to be a lot of hand-wringing in Vol Country because that's just the way it is. So I am curious about Tennessee in this tournament. Every time I feel like I have a good read on Tennessee, they do the opposite. There was a period of time where I'm like, I'm not sure I trust the Volunteers because when they play the other top teams in the SEC, they don't win. They were blown out by Florida the first time around. Now, they did give them a receipt by blowing them out the second time around, but I saw them lose to Vanderbilt. I saw them lose a hard-fought game to Auburn. I saw them lose to Kentucky. So every time I'm like, oh, I'm not really sure how much I trust the Vols. They do something that makes me think, oh, maybe I should. And then they do the opposite again. It's like, okay, well then, they beat Alabama. That was a fantastic game against Alabama in Knoxville a couple of weeks ago. Then they lose to Ole Miss. So I don't have a good read on these Vols, man.
Yeah, they're definitely not as consistent as they were last year. And I worry about their chances in the NCAA tournament because they don't have a player like Dalton Knecht this year. Like Chaz Lanier is a good player, but he's not Dalton Knecht. And this week, I think Tennessee is an interesting team because for them, in order to get to the one line, and correct me if you have a different thought on this, but I think they've got to win the whole thing if they want to become a 1 seed.
To me right now, the pecking order so let's start here. I said this with you yesterday. I think, barring something completely unforeseen, I think 3 of the number
Right.
1 seeds are locked. Auburn, despite its recent struggles, is going to be the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament. They've had an incredibly impressive season. Duke will be number 2 of the 1 seeds, and Houston. So to me, the final number 1 seed are those 3 SEC teams,
Right.
Florida, Alabama, and Tennessee. And right now, I would have Tennessee 3rd of the 3.
Me too, which means if it goes close to chalk and we get Florida, Alabama in one semifinal, that would kind of be an elimination game for a 1 seed per se. The winner of that game probably moves into that 4th and final 1 seed spot. And if Tennessee was to beat Auburn, I think they would probably put themselves about even with the winner of that Florida Alabama game. And then I think you put whoever wins the SEC championship in that final 1 spot. It would be easy for the committee to do that, right? Because things are going to work itself out. If it's Tennessee, Florida, and Alabama, if Florida and Alabama face each other, winner of that game moves into the spot. And if they face Tennessee in the championship, the winner of that game moves into the final 1 seed. So Tennessee, in order to really make any meaningful difference in their seeding for March Madness, probably has to win 3 games in 3 days. So I don't know how this week really works out for them, because I don't really see them beating Auburn in the semifinals. They could.
Right. So their path to a potential SEC title would be defeating Texas A&M, Vanderbilt, or Texas in their first game, because Tennessee gets the double bye as the 4th seeded team in the SEC tournament. So their first game will be against either Texas A&M, Texas, or Vanderbilt on Friday. Then they would have to face Auburn, theoretically, in the semifinal before facing either Florida or Alabama in the championship game.
Yeah, it's a murderer's row right there.
So correct me if I'm wrong here. Tennessee has never been a number 1 seed in its program history.
I don't believe so.
They've been a 2 many times. I do not believe they've been a number 1 seed. And I think they have a difficult path. I agree with you. I feel like that Florida-Alabama potential game on Saturday in the semifinals is the winner gets the number 1 seed. Loser is a 2 seed. And look, those 3 teams, the 2 that don't get the 1 seed are absolutely going to be 2 seeds. But I just don't have a good read on this Volunteers team. But as we look at the matchups for tomorrow, again, first round action starting tomorrow at Bridgestone Arena. South Carolina and Arkansas kicks us off. Texas and Vanderbilt, roughly 2:30. A 6 o'clock start, LSU and Mississippi State, followed by Oklahoma and Georgia in the nightcap. If Vanderbilt were to vanquish the Longhorns, they would play Texas A&M on Thursday afternoon, roughly 2:30 again. But I'm really excited about this tournament. I mean, I love this time of year, obviously, as a gigantic basketball fan, college basketball fan. But Jay Bilas said at one point this season that he thinks it's going to be harder to win the SEC tournament than the NCAA tournament, just because the fact that you're playing every day and the quality of opponents you're playing every day. Because in the NCAA tournament, if you're a 1 seed, there's a 16 seed. Usually you take care of that pretty easily. You might get a scare from the 8 or 9, but again, usually the 1 seeds escape those games. I have a hard time disagreeing with Bilas on that point.
No, having to play back-to-back days is tough. And I mean, you look at any of those teams playing in the second round who get the single bye, Ole Miss, A&M, Missouri, Kentucky, all talented teams. But if they want to make a run, you're probably playing another NCAA tournament team day 1. You're playing one of the top 7 teams in the country on day 2, day 3, and day 4 to try and win a championship. That's not easy to do. I don't know if I could say it's harder than winning the NCAA tournament. The key for the SEC this year is they've got to have a little more success in March Madness, because last year it wasn't quite as much talk about this being the best conference ever, but the SEC was talked about as the dominant conference last year. And then I think they only got 2 teams to the Sweet 16.
Well, Florida lost early. Auburn lost
lost
early.
early.
Alabama made it to at least the Sweet 16. They beat
went
North
to the Final
Carolina. Yeah, they
Four.
beat North
And
Carolina.
Tennessee was in the Elite Eight, but that might have been it. I hate to be if I'm completely missing somebody.
Matthew in Nashville, who is a Vols fan, says we're the ultimate Jekyll and Hyde team this year, and it has me worried about the NCAA tournament. And that's kind of how I feel.
Yes, Tennessee and Alabama were the only SEC teams to make it through the first weekend last year.
How many teams made it overall? Do you have
16. Oh, sorry. How many SEC teams made it?
Yes, to the tournament last year.
Let me see.
But what I like about these first round games is they're all meaningful. I mean, Arkansas could use a decent showing in the SEC tournament to solidify its spot. Vanderbilt, despite the fact that we said they were a lock to be in after their recent winning streak, they've lost a couple games in a row.
Eight SC teams
Yes,
were in.
8 teams got
Thank
in.
you.
So 2 out of 8 made the Sweet 16, while the ACC, who only got, 4 teams in, I think all of them made it. Because
Clemson was in the Final Four last year, right?
Clemson made the Sweet 16.
Or NC State made the Final Four
North
last
Carolina
year.
made the Sweet 16. NC State made the Sweet 16. Duke made the Sweet 16. So the ACC, who barely got anybody in last year, got 4 to the Sweet 16. The SEC had 8 get in and only got 2. So the SEC, no matter what they do this week, somebody's they've got to hold up a little bit when we get to March Madness.
Jake, before we let you go, since I won't see you before the end of this tournament, what is your early SEC tournament prediction?
I said Alabama yesterday. I will stick with Alabama. I think that Alabama-Florida game is going to be big. I don't think Auburn's going to win it. Give me Alabama.
All right. Well, that'll do it for us. We will be in full SEC tournament mode starting tomorrow, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. You can catch us from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. tomorrow at Mellow Mushroom on Broadway. I believe it's 423 Broadway, right next door to Bridgestone Arena. Come see us. We will be broadcasting live all day long. We will be talking SEC basketball, watching SEC basketball, of course, keeping an eye on the NFL as well. But that'll do it for us today. Stillman & Company coming up next. And on behalf of Derek, be loved, love on your people. Have a wonderful Tuesday. Peace.